Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You're a software developer. You build a website, right? A tool designed specifically to help ordinary people speak up about a really controversial government proposal.
And then boom, you get arrested for it.
Exactly. That startling scenario isn't hypothetical. It's the real event kicking off our deep dive today.
We're looking closely at sources covering the recent case of Rose Njeri in Kenya. Her situation became a real focal point very quickly.
Yeah, it seems to touch on so many things. Technology, civic action around this proposed 2025 finance bill, and just fundamental rights.
Absolutely. And our mission here is to walk you through what happened. Based on these sources, we'll look at the sequence of events, the legal arguments from both sides.
And really unpack the bigger questions this whole episode throws up about, digital freedom, the space for public dissent, and how the law is applied.
Okay, so where did the sources say this all started?
It begins, according to the accounts we've seen, on a Friday afternoon. Nairobi South B. Rose Njeri is arrested.
And who made the arrest?
Detectives from the DCI, that's the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, Kenya's main investigative body.
Got it. And the reason given, allegedly.
The sources point to this online platform she created called Civic Email.
Civic email?
Yeah, and its purpose seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Help citizens object to that 2025 finance bill. It basically facilitated sending emails, lots of them, to the official channels set up for feedback.
So she's trying to streamline public participation, essentially.
That seems to be the idea behind the tool. But the immediate aftermath of her arrest was, well, quite challenging, according to these sources.
How so?
She was taken to Pangani police station, and she didn't just spend Friday night there. She spent a second night the whole weekend in custody.
Wow, over the weekend. Was she denied bail?
Yes, sources highlight that. They also mentioned she was dealing with a medical condition, and importantly, she's a mother of 2 young kids, so being held without bail under those circumstances.
That sounds rough. And what about her legal team? Could they get her out?
Well, that's another point the sources emphasize the difficulties her lawyers faced. They apparently struggled to secure her release or even just to get clear information on why she was being held or what the formal charges were.
So just held incommunicado almost.
It sounds like there were serious barriers. One account mentions the officer in charge at Pangani saying his hands were tied, that the case was with the DCI's serious crimes desk.
Serious crimes for building a website.
That's the designation mentioned. And efforts by her lawyers, even including a senior counsel, to just see her were apparently blocked initially.
That seems unusual, blocking access to counsel.
It certainly raised flags. Some sources note she arrived at Pangani around 1 p.m. on Saturday.
So mid-afternoon.
Right. And the comment recorded in one source was that there seemed to be enough time to process bail for her that day. But it didn't happen.
So this lack of access, the detention over the weekend, no bail, no clear charges. It's not surprising it caused a stir.
Oh, absolutely. The reaction was strong and immediate. Sources use terms like widespread outrage, particularly on social media.
People saw it as, what, oppression?
That phrase, active oppression, comes up. Many seem to view it as targeting someone using tech for, civic engagement on a hot-button issue.
And did specific groups or prominent individuals speak out?
Yes, quite a few.
Yeah.
Supporters, various human rights organizations, they started demanding her immediate release.
On what grounds?
They argued the arrest looked politically motivated, basically an attempt to stifle criticism of that finance bill.
Okay, so rights groups are involved. Anyone else?
Yes, and this was significant. The former Chief Justice, David Maraga, weighed in publicly.
The former head of the judiciary, what did he say?
He condemned the arrest quite strongly on Sunday morning, called it heartless. The sources quote him urging the government to respect the rule of law and stop what he called abductions of peaceful dissenters.
Strong words from a figure like Maraga.
Very. And it's notable that his legal team actually ended up representing Njeri later on.
Interesting. What about the legal profession itself? The Law Society?
The Law Society of Kenya, the LSK, also got involved. Sources say they issued a warning about the danger of criminalizing civic tech tools like the one Njeri built. They worried it could set a really bad precedent for digital freedoms in Kenya.
So, chilling effect concerns.
Exactly. The LSK president, Faith Odhiambo, also spoke out about the frustrations lawyers were facing just trying to get access to Njeri to provide that basic legal counsel.
Right. The timing of all this also seems pointed, doesn't it? You mentioned the weekend.
Yes, the sources highlight that. The arrest happened right before Maraga Day,
which is a major national holiday celebrating self-governance, freedom.
Precisely. So the irony, or perhaps the message of her being held on that particular weekend, wasn't lost on people. Some sources called it extremely unfortunate.
And there was something about a presidential apology, too.
Yeah, observers connected this to President Ruto's recent comments during a national prayer breakfast. He'd spoken about listening to the youth, even apologized.
So this arrest seemed to contradict that message.
That was the view many expressed. It felt like a disconnect. There's even a quote from a senior counsel, possibly frustrated by the access issues, asking something like, "What freedom are we enjoying if this is how even a senior lawyer is treated?"
It really puts the focus on the gap between rhetoric and reality regarding civic space.
Definitely. So you have this building pressure, this public outcry, legal maneuvering, and then finally she's brought to court.
Okay, so after how long?
4 days in police custody. She was arraigned on Tuesday morning, Nairobi court, before Magistrate Geoffrey Onsigo.
And the state finally laid out its charges.
Yes. Cybercrime charges. Specifically, the accusation was unauthorized interference with computer systems.
Interference. How did they define that?
The prosecution's argument, based on the sources, was that she knowingly made a program, the website, that automatically generated and sent mass emails.
To where? To the official systems of the Clerk of the National Assembly.
Ah, the parliamentary email system.
Right. And the state alleged that this mass emailing disrupted normal operations of parliamentary communication systems. They claimed this violated Kenya's Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act.
So the volume of emails generated by her tool was framed as a criminal disruption.
That appears to be the core of the state's case, yes.
Which, naturally, the defense strongly contested.
Vehemently, it sounds like. Her legal team, with Maraga involved, objected straight away.
What were their grounds?
They called the charges fabricated, baseless, even not tribal under current law, though the meaning of tribal there might need context, perhaps meaning not fitting the legal definitions. Fundamentally, they said the charges were unconstitutional.
A direct challenge on constitutional grounds. What was their main argument?
The heart of it was that her actions were perfectly legal, falling squarely within her rights of freedom of expression and public participation.
Rights guaranteed in the Constitution.
Exactly. They positioned her work not as a crime, but as facilitating those very rights in the digital age.
Did they address the specific claim about interfering with the parliamentary email system?
Oh, yes, very directly.
Yeah.
And this seems crucial. They pointed out that the specific email address targeted by her tool had been publicly designated by Parliament itself.
Designated for what?
Designated specifically for citizen feedback on the very finance bill she was helping people comment on.
Wait, so Parliament asked for emails to that address, and she built a tool to help send them?
That's the defense's argument, yes.
Yeah.
They basically said, look, if you invite public feedback via email, how can helping people send that feedback be illegal interference?
That seems like a powerful point. It reframes the entire situation.
It does. Sources quote her legal team suggesting she should be applauded for essentially doing Parliament's work, for making public participation easier when it had been explicitly invited.
So not a disruption, but an enhancement of the democratic process, in their view.
Precisely.
Right.
Framing it as a service, not a crime.
Okay, so we had these two starkly opposing views presented in court. State alleging cybercrime, defense citing constitutional rights, and parliamentary invitation. What happened then? Did she get bail?
She was released, yes. Not on cash bail, interestingly, but on a personal bond.
How much?
100,000 Kenya shillings. The sources mentioned she was finally brought before the magistrate around noon on that Tuesday.
So even on the day of the court appearance, there were delays?
Apparently so. Hours of waiting that morning, described as anxious. It underscores the persistent difficulties right up until her release.
She's out, but it's not over, is it?
No, not at all. The legal case continues. The sources clearly state the court set a date June 20th.
And what happens on June 20th?
That's when the magistrate is scheduled to rule on whether the state actually has a strong enough case to proceed with the cybercrime charges. So whether she'll formally face trial.
A crucial decision point, then.
Absolutely. And after she was released, Njeri herself spoke out.
What did she say?
Sources detail her statement, where she described the whole thing as an illegal arrest. She mentioned feeling intimidation by around 15 men during the arrest process.
15 men.
That's the number cited. And she reiterated her view that the whole basis for the charges, the lack of crime committed, was, in her word, ridiculous.
Did she comment on the public support?
Yes, she expressed relief and gratitude for the public reaction
Yeah.
and the support she'd received, suggesting it made a real difference.
And this public interest wasn't just online chatter, right? There were actual protests.
That's right. Sources mentioned tensions flaring up outside the court earlier on that Tuesday. Security officers apparently clashed with protesters who had gathered there.
Why were they protesting?
They were demanding her immediate presentation in court, likely frustrated by the delays happening that morning. It just shows the level of public feeling invested in this case.
And her legal team, did they have any final words after her release on bond?
They did. As reported in the sources, they strongly criticized the state, accusing them of what they termed a growing pattern of fabricating charges.
Against who?
Against individuals involved in civic action or dissent. So, framing this case as part of a larger, worrying trend.
Okay, let's try and, pull these threads together. What does this whole story, as laid out by the sources, really tell us?
Well, this deep dive into Rose Njeri's case really throws a spotlight on a critical tension point in contemporary Kenya. It's right at the intersection of civic tech, public participation, and the power of the state.
Especially concerning that controversial 2025 Finance Bill, which seems to be the backdrop for everything.
Exactly. You've got, on one hand, a citizen using her tech skills. She builds a tool to help people engage collectively on a major national issue, using the very channels the government provided.
It seems like digital democracy in action, potentially.
But then on the other hand, you have the state reacting with serious cybercrime charges, framing that facilitation of feedback as a kind of illegal interference or disruption.
Yeah, it forces you to ask some fundamental questions, doesn't it? The ones raised by these sources.
Definitely. Like, what are the real limits of free speech and digital freedom today? When does online organizing cross a line, if ever?
And what about the right to public participation? If institutions like Parliament ask for digital feedback, how does that change the equation? Can facilitating that invited feedback really be a crime?
And how should laws like the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act be applied? Are they meant for hackers and malicious actors? Or can they be used against tools designed for civic engagement, even if they generate high volume?
Plus, the whole process raises concerns about the rule of law itself. Timely charges, access to lawyers, the right to bail. The sources highlight issues at each of those steps.
It's a really complex knot of technology, rights, law, and governance, all tangled up in this one case.
So, just to recap for everyone listening, we've followed this story from that Friday arrest through the weekend outcry and legal battles to her court appearance on Tuesday and release on bond. We've heard the state's case and the defense's strong counterarguments based on the Constitution.
And importantly, the sources remind us it's ongoing. That June 20th ruling is the next key date to watch. It'll decide if these cybercrime charges actually stick.
This case, looking at it through the lens of these sources, it really highlights a core tension for our times. We have these amazing digital tools now, right? Tools that can potentially supercharge civic engagement, let lots of people participate easily, the kind of participation that, theoretically, institutions say they want.
But then when these tools are used effectively, maybe generating a lot of noise or feedback.
Oh, at once when questions pop up. Are existing laws, like cybercrime laws, being applied fairly? Or could they be perhaps misused to dampen that very participation? Especially when, as in this case, the participation was explicitly invited through digital channels.
It really makes you wonder, where exactly is that line between legitimate, invited public input facilitated by technology and something authorities might deem disruptive or overwhelming?
And, maybe more importantly, who gets to draw that line? And based on what criteria? It's something for all of us to think about, really. What does effective, protected democratic participation look like for you, for all of us in this digital age?